Hello, welcome to Creative You Podcast. I'm Catherine Kirby. This is a podcast about knitting and crocheting and lots of chatter. Welcome back, all of you. And I've been getting some new subscribers, so thank you. I love knitting and crocheting podcasts, but I feel like someone wrote a script and everybody feels like they have to say and do the same things. And what about individuality? So I don't really follow a script. My life tends to be kind of chaotic, so I don't always get things finished that I showed you at the last podcast. Or I also run a yarn shop, and so maybe some of the things are there and not at home. I used to film at the yarn shop, and the lighting was terrible. And no matter where, hi Patches, come on up. If Patches came up on my lap, I would be shocked. I have had her a year and a half, and she does not let me hold her. Now, if I would get up, come on. If I would get up and leave, she would take my chair. But every now and then I pick her up. She's kind of fat. She's lost weight, so she has that skin that hangs down and swaggers back and forth. And when I pick her up, she'll give the most contented, like, murp, murp, and then she'll get angry. And if I try to touch her for weeks, she's on guard. So what have I been doing? I wish I'd been doing more. I have a condition called fibromyalgia, and when it flares, I can't do anything. I was in bed last week, and I tried. I had severe pain, and maybe the third day, I got up and walked over to the counter, and next thing, I'm on the floor. I didn't know I was going down. I didn't faint. It must have been weak legs. But if you've ever slipped on ice, that's how it is. 1 second you're standing and the next minute. But right away, I thanked God that I didn't have any broken bones. I wasn't bleeding. And then you have to figure out, okay, how do I get back to bed? And so I didn't get much done. What I did kind of fiddle around with while I watched a bunch of movies. I went back and watched like Jesus of Nazareth and all the Jesus movies. You know, sometimes, why did they make Joseph look like an old man? Some of them, he was young and exuberant and full of life, but did you ever see the Christmas cards where they make Joseph look like he's about 80 years old? So I was fooling around with doing leaves, and this is a yarn called Noema. It has all different colors in it. I was going to put them on the window at the yarn shop. I don't know if you can really see that good. This one, I think I have a whole bunch of them somewhere. This is with a worsted weight yarn. I don't have my last point done there yet, but it's a neat little free pattern. And then I'd like to do some other leaves too. And what I want to do is put together a podcast with all these little projects that take like just little tiny amounts of yarn. There's my little gourd made with the same yarn, and I think I should put little eyes on it or something and make some more. When you have a yarn shop, there are lots of yarns that just don't sell. And then you wonder, what do I do? What do I do with these yarns? This is one. It was an Ella Rae yarn called Toowoomba. And it's very, very difficult to find something that this yarn looks good with. So I decided to do a pumpkin. You can do a pumpkin by just doing like a miniature cow and then gather it, put your stem. I've noticed some people are doing cinnamon sticks. That would smell good. They're kind of rigid though. I kind of like a little stem that It's kind of floppy. So I noticed almost right away that I started getting color pooling. Well, you may say it's just a little pumpkin, but I started to get lots of this tan color. And so then I started knitting from both ends of the skein, trying to spread it out. So that should be finished by next week. I ran out of stuffing. Now, this woman came into the shop yesterday and said her daughter is in her second year of college and she learned to crochet and she's bored and she wants to make her mother a blanket. But in the meantime, she's been making pumpkins. And of course, she's away from home. She doesn't have stuff. So literally, she doesn't have stuffing. And so she was using plastic bags from the grocery stores. This was one of the first little things I crocheted. It is called Ronnie the Cat. It's a free pattern. And I didn't realize back then that you have to stuff stuffies like rocks because over time they settle and they get floppy. And I also didn't know that you want to crochet with a much smaller hook because you don't want your stuffing coming through. So I think my stitches are spaced far enough apart that I can take a crochet hook or a knitting needle and kind of restuff him. But he is cute. You know, I think he's cute. He has a little pumpkin top. He's coming out of the pumpkin. He has a little tail. So yeah, you can get these little pellets that you put on the bottom that give it weight, and that would help, you know. And you could put, if this was a toy for a child, you could put a little jingle bell or something in there. So this was a cool yarn that I found, and I thought, wouldn't that make a great pumpkin stem? It's kind of like a ribbon. Well, it is a ribbon, not kinda. But no matter where I tried it and what pumpkin, it just didn't look right. Maybe a ivory colored pumpkin. I don't know. So this same yarn, Toowoomba, I thought maybe I would crochet a pumpkin. But because pumpkins have ridges, I decided that I would do the orange yarn every other row, but I think I missed my own memo there. And I don't know how it's going to look, but some things you have to wait until the end to make a decision, because when you just look at it, you don't like it. So you say, well, later when it's finished. And some things that you didn't like in the beginning, you like a lot later. I was also making hearts, and my dog, he's a short-haired dog, but boy, does that boy shed. I found a pattern for a free crocheted heart, and now I don't know where it is, and I'm not going to rumble in the bag, but I then created my own pattern. So I'll have to get around to writing that up, but don't be afraid to experiment. And so I did trebles, like 5 trebles in one stitch, and then knitted hearts. That's also a free pattern. This is a sparkly yarn and a yellow one. I think the yellow one shows the stitches better. There's like a middle ridge that I don't think you see on that, but they're fun. I could see decorating the window or the door. I should have been a school teacher when I was in medical school training, we had a guy in our residency program that was really tight with money, really cheap. And when he found out that teachers have to buy their own decorations for the class and all their things, said, no, I couldn't be a teacher. I think I might have told you that for the first time in my life, I got 1,500 count sheets. Sleeping so much better. They're nice and comfy. My husband, he's a Vietnam veteran. He fights battles in his sleep and he scratches himself. And within 24 hours, the sheet and the pillowcase had dried blood. By the second day, there was more. And by the third day, the dog had jumped up and left a scratch. And so what can I say? But I think I might have told you that I ordered pillows from the pillow guy, Frank Lindell. Is it Lindell? And so I ordered a set for my daughter and her husband because they had an anniversary, birthdays. Same with my son and his wife, and then for Paul and I. So one day I'm thinking, it's about time for the pillows to come. And sure enough, there was a box on the porch, but it was small. And I'm wondering that the pillows can't be in there. Well, sure enough, there were 6 of them like stuffed in there. And I look at this thing, because these things are supposed to be like wonderful and you're getting this great deal on them. And I'm like, are you serious? And you take it out of the bag and it's this flat little lumpy thing. It looks like a lump here and a lump there and a lump there. Well, it tells you to put it in the dryer on high heat, I think, for 15 minutes, and voila, you get this big, fluffy pillow. Now, it's not a solid form. It's pieces, but it's pretty comfortable. If I had to do it over again, I would have gotten the firm and not the regular. So I haven't asked my daughter yet how they like theirs. Today, somebody came in the yarn shop, and yesterday, looking for an Afghan pattern, and today a baby blanket pattern. And I do have lots of books, but they both liked this, and I shouldn't say pattern, it's a stitch. And you could just stripe it the same, but it does make it more interesting, I think. This is Ella Rae Cozy Soft Yarn, which is a DK yarn. And after 6 years, this blanket still looks great. This is, I guess, the corner to corner stitch. It looks like 3 double crochets, chain 1 or 2, and a single. So both ladies really liked this. Here's one done out of Bernat Coordinates yarn in a solid, just a solid color. And it does really look pretty in a solid color. Wow, when you hold that up, that is so pretty. And then, everybody seems afraid to use their scraps and blend them. But when they see someone else do it, they love it. So here's the other one, which is the rest of the yellow, and then a mixture of variegated colors. Isn't that pretty? So it makes me happy when people call and they want to take a class or 2 or 3. Now, if a baby blanket is 36 inches wide, and we had this problem yesterday, and you want to do one that is 45 inches wide with the same weight yarn, how do you figure out how many stitches? And it's really quite easy. And when people see me do it, they're like, oh, I can't do that. That's algebra. It's cross multiplying. So you have 180 stitches over 36 inches equals how many stitches over 45 inches? You cross multiply, you come out with 225 stitches. So don't let, don't let math scare you, or don't let, it's not difficult. A couple years ago, I was making, I think it's called the Mindless Scarf. And again, it's just double crochets and singles. And I found this today. It somehow got packed away. This is a yarn called Knitting Fever Painted Mist. It's kind of like a machine knitted. And then every so often it has these little nubs. Well, this was another victim of the whole COVID thing because it got discontinued. Let me see if you can see this. I don't know if you can see. I don't think. It just looks fuzzy. And so I found this. Apparently I decided to use the same pattern for a baby blanket. And the colors are pretty and bright. And it is just a 2 double crochets, chain 2, 1 single crochet. And you just keep doing that. And I think I use Misty Rainbow. Now, I'm wondering, should I make stripes like the other blanket? And at first I thought this was like an off-white, but it's not. It's called Prismatic Pearl. And it's actually pinks and like pastel colors. So what do you think? I would love to get some comments back on my, I just dropped my crochet hook. I'd like to see lots of comments on the podcast. My podcast only has a tiny amount of views because for whatever reason, when people Google knitting or crocheting podcast, my podcast never comes up. People don't even know I exist. I mean, I don't want to think it's because I'm boring or anything. Oh, a few years back, this was one of the top knitting patterns of the year called Fetchings. Oh, you ready to go? Wait till I fetch my fingerless mitts made out of an Aran weight yarn. This is Debbie Bliss Baby Cashmerino, not baby, Cashmerino Aran, which is now Ella Ray. And it can take 1 skein. The pattern's kind of funny. It says it may just take 1 skein, or it may take more, which then you could use the rest to make a second pair. Well, now wait a minute. If 1 skein didn't make 1 pair, opening up a second skein and finishing these, you're not going to have enough left. But anyway, when you pull up the pattern, it would say this is a $10 pattern. But then you figured out you could get it free. And I think a lot of people just thought, wow, what a deal. But it is a nice pattern. It's a very nice pattern. Has nice stretch. They're nice and soft. I like the little ruffle effect at the top. So that is that. I was working on a yellow sweater that had like a a fake seam, and I showed it to you, and I had a mistake, and I ripped way back. So I'm not going to even show that today, and I'm not going to show you things that I didn't work on. That's just silly. I had done a Stockholm Hat a couple podcasts ago, and I use Babe Jazz, which is a sport weight baby type yarn, and I use mohair, and my mohair actually did striping, so the hat changed, but I am loving this. Now this is just a solid mohair Ella Ray silky, but this is my kind of colors. And I don't think you can tell, but the gray is like a purplish. It's just beautiful. I wish things showed better on camera. But these hats take me a long time. Knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. So that may not be done for quite a while. I used to get things from a place called Discontinued Brand Name Yarns, and they closed or went out of business. And you could get a grab bag for like $25 minus whatever the discount of the day was. My dog found his squeaky toy, and I had this knitting all scrunched in there, and it had, in the middle, it had like a big, almost looked like a big piece of fabric, and we couldn't figure out what it was, but I think I showed this before, but it's worth showing again. Somebody did this beautiful shawl, had about this much yarn left. It's enough to cast off. There were directions, but they didn't have the name, and I only had one page, and it is beautiful. So I finally decided it's time to wash it and block it. And so it makes you think, don't leave those almost finished projects. Or maybe she didn't have any more yarn, and he or she, and didn't think about just binding it off. I also showed you, I don't remember if this is called bubble gum. I might be way off, but I had shown you one. This is one that Sharon made. Sharon comes into the shop and also works. Louisa Harding Marmo is the yarn. And it has these luscious, this is the reverse side. I'm trying to get the colors and I can't. Luscious, like almost like mahogany with deep, deep umber tones and grays. And it is a free pattern. It's just a long, luscious shawl. Mine is almost finished, and I did mine with a bigger needle, I think. So we'll see how the two compare. It's actually kind of a pretty nice day in the 70s. So my husband says, well, are we going to go to Hilton Head? You know what? I had a week in bed. I have a diabetic dog that my grandsons are afraid of. I have a indoor-outdoor cat, which he's usually just out front on our porch and in the bushes. And he came home yesterday with like a cut. I didn't hear a cat fight. I don't know what to think, but I'm thinking, what if I go away and he gets an infected ear? I can put one dog in the kennel, but I can't afford to put 3 dogs in the kennel for a week. And, we were kind of talking at the shop today that a man will just say, let's go. And the woman is thinking about all these other things that are happening and occurring and have to be taken care of, and wondering, how are we going to do that? My husband had to have a bone marrow biopsy because, I'm sorry, I look an absolute mess because we think from the Agent Orange exposure, they monitor him for malignant melanoma. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were like positive he had it. And I cried all the time. I was at the shop all the time crying. And it just went away. And maybe because he got so sick in March and April, I don't know, but the numbers have never been higher. So he has a patch on his backside, and then he had cataract surgery in the past, and he got the films over his eyes, so he had to have surgery on that, and it didn't help much. So yeah, you come to that point in your age where maybe you're not going to be driving 10, 12 miles on a vacation. This is a Icelandic wool sweater right from Iceland. And boy, has a high itch content because even through my denims, I'm itching. So a man brought this into the shop. He took a trip to Iceland, I think with a high school team, and spent $300 to get his wife this sweater. And I think it might have been a mild winter, I don't know, but the moths got it. And so he wants me to fix it. And I started taking this down, but it's down into the whole way down into the white. I don't have a white yarn that matches that, and we've fooled around now. And then there are some other holes in it here and there. Oh, there. I might have to do darning. And then along the rim. So I was gonna tear out the ribbing and redo it. And I mean, he couldn't get anyone else to do it, and I didn't want to turn him down, but now I've had this sweater all this time and I haven't fixed it. Oh, say a prayer for me. So I like to tell you about a Bible verse, and there's a verse in Peter that says, and above all things, have fervent love among yourselves, because love covers a multitude of sins or errors. And I've been getting hit with this verse because things happen, they upset you, or your husband does something or something else, and we want to tell somebody, especially when it's our husband. Years ago, I had a friend. I was young. She was older than me, and I liked her husband. They had 2 nice little kids, and she would say, did I tell you what that blankety blank husband of mine did? And even at that young age, I didn't like that. So interestingly, the Bible says, husband, love your wives as your own body. To the women, it says, respect your husband. It also says the older women will teach the younger women how to love their husbands. And while I'm thinking about all this, our pastor had it in his sermon. And he said, when I was younger, I thought, I'm lovable. I don't need an old woman teaching my wife how to love me. He laughed as he said it. I heard a husband say, we want respect, whether we mess up or not. And so God's been dealing with me about this. So your husband does something, and then you tell somebody and somebody else, and God's showing me that's not good. It's not respecting him. So my husband missed a very important couple day, if you can picture what that was. And he forgot last year, I think the year before. And the older you get, is it worth getting all mad and blowing the week and being all mad at each other and having your husband go in a shell? And so I asked him, I've given you a week now. Do you remember this date? And he laughed and said, well, at least I'm consistent. And I actually laughed too. And it felt good. Felt good not to be all wrapped up in my expectations. So, and above all things, have fervent. I looked that up. It means without ceasing, just ongoing love among yourselves, as love covers a multitude of sins or errors. And that word cover means to hide the knowledge of the thing. So instead of telling people, we hide it. That's not the same as telling a lie or anything. So a good example is years ago, there was a younger woman that I got acquainted with. We were friends. I really liked her. We worked together at the hospital. And then somebody came and told me, well, do you know she did such and such with Dr. such and such? And my first reaction is, oh, don't spread that. Oh, let's do what we can to, put a cover over it and not get that out. She's a really nice person. I mean, I don't know what goes on in somebody's lives, but I know people are really hard on themselves when they mess up. And that's what it means. But a higher calling is, are you able to take your disappointment, your bitterness, whatever, take it to God and then not bring it up, not rag the person? I asked you to plant that flower last week and it's still sitting out there. Can you just let it go? So I think once God puts something on your heart, you're going to get tested. So I had a lot going on yesterday. I got home from the shop. My hips were killing me. But I had the grandsons, which is a joy. But when they're around, a lot of things happen, and the dogs and this, and the doors open, and the flies are coming in, and somebody's yelling because this happened. And I had promised to make a meal for a man who was coming home from the hospital that day because he had had surgery the day before. And he didn't live in town, so it involved, I wasn't really sure what to make. And then there's his wife, and they have a special needs mother that lives with her mother. And so I didn't want to make too much and burden them, but I finally decided to brown some chicken. And I had this chunky soup, and I added, I cooked pasta and added that to it. And then you have to make a meal for your family too, because I used to give my husband directions. Look, this is what you have to do to make this family a meal. And I would come home and then he would run off and I'd be like, where's ours? And he'd be like, oh, I didn't start that yet. Well, you make double. But anyway, so getting this meal finished, and then, oh, we need a vegetable, and I'd baked a pie and run it out to his house, which is way out in the country, only to find out that he didn't have the surgery because the doctor had to leave or something, some circumstances nobody told me. And their son and his wife were home for the past 2 days, and nobody told me that either. And when my husband took the meal in, he came home and said, well, there were more than 3 people. And then when he told me, my first reaction was, well, why was I running all around with all these other things to do when his son and daughter-in-law were home for 2 days and could have easily, right? Well, you know how it goes. It ended up, my husband and I had a little spat. Isn't that what we do? We take that stress, that something that happened out here, and it ends up with the person you love. And so right away, I just stopped and I thought of this verse. Now, if you've accepted Jesus as your Savior, his love is like a channel that runs through you to other people. And I asked myself, is the love of God flowing through me? Isn't that enough to just cover this? Let it go. Don't bring it up again. Don't bring it up tomorrow. Let it go. That is what God does with us. If you said, Lord, I'm sorry, you already asked forgiveness for that. That's already gone. So I kind of got an attitude adjustment, and I'm wondering what the next test will be until I get this down right. The last thing to show you is my yellow sweater got ripped out, but knitting and crocheting is every bit about fads and everybody wanting to make the same things. And right now it's the Felix pullover, but I'm doing the cardigan. So you have these nice little kind of diagonal stripes. I don't know with my variegated yarn how much that is going to show up. Many of you have probably already seen this pullover done by other people, but I chose a DK Merino and a yarn called Lanagato Brooklyn. And I thought these two would really be fun together. Well, I'm not convinced that they are. So this is kind of like the Painted Mist, but not nubs, but every so often you have these little space dyed colors. I don't know that this purple, which is pretty accurate, was the right color. Maybe a very light gray. I don't know. So last Saturday at the shop, I was working on this, and Holly, my friend, was there, and I said, I'm going to rip this out. You know what? It's darker than what you're seeing. It's darker. And this actually makes it look gray. It looks like purple and gray. Yeah, not showing very good, but I said, I don't like it. I'm going to rip it out. And Holly said, well, I think it's kind of cute. So like that other project, I'm going to reserve judgment until it's completely finished. And then see. And who knows, it may turn out to be a favorite thing. It is soft, but it still makes me, in my mind, already planning the next one. So I guess it's time to say goodbye. There's a lot going on in the world. Look up. Keep your attention on God. He is on the throne. Don't look at everything else that you can't do anything about, you can't control. You can only pray. And you know, the Bible tells us, first of all, pray for those in authority. We tend to pray for friends, family. But I remember one time years ago, somebody said there was a prayer team that once a week would meet and they would pray for all the people in the California government. Each person would take one politician, and one day they would actually meet and pray together. And I think they had a day of fasting, and amazing things happen. So maybe we're not holding up our end of praying, but it sure does seem like things are heading in the direction of the book of Revelation. So I love all of you. It means so much to me that you stick with my little podcast and spend time with me. And I would love to hear from all of you. I don't get comments, so I don't know who's out there, who's listening. But for now, I'll say shine, baby, shine, and bye.